Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Fenrir. Fenrir is an assassin, but that's where the labels stop. Fenrir is viable in the solo lane, support, and jungle roles. He excels at having a lot of movement and is exceptional at taking extended trades. He is good as a pure tank, bruiser, or full-on damage monster, and the scary thing is, you can go any of those builds in any of those roles, and Fenrir will still be effective. Of course, full damage is best for jungle, bruiser for solo lane, and full tank for support, but again, when you pick Fenrir, the world is your oyster. He's not unstoppable though, you need to be good at Fenrir to get the most out of him. Relics wise, of course, depends on what build you're going. Full damage can go Blink and Beads, whereas bruiser and full tank can go something like Blink and Sunder or Blink and Horrific. Shard wise, you have the pick of the litter. He's good with Claw Shard, Horn Shard, and Wing Shard, with Claw Shard actually being a standout for him. Okay, so I'm recording this on Tuesday morning before the patches even dropped. I forgot about the whole food consumable thing. So if you want my input on that, I guess Party Punch is probably the best for jungle, and then Sturdy Stew probably still work in jungle. That would be just fine. Sturdy Stew would work well in support and jungle, and if you're going like a bruiser build in the jungle, you can go Sturdy Stew. I guess. I don't know. Haven't actually played it yet. But anyways, let's start dissecting why Fenrir is good at pretty much everything by talking about his passive. Every time Fenrir successfully lands a basic attack, he will gain a stack of his passive. This passive has no effect other than when you reach maximum stacks, and each time any of your other 4 abilities are used, the 5 passive stacks will be consumed on that one ability. Speaking of which, Fenrir will be given 3 stacks upon receiving an assist on an enemy god when they die, and will be given 5 stacks upon killing an enemy god, so strap in and get ready to be aggressive with Fenrir. Let's get to what I mean by talking about Fenrir's first ability. Fenrir leaps in and deals damage in a small AoE. And if it hits an enemy god, the cooldown will be reduced by 30%. And that's pretty much it. Fenrir is a very gold god at this point, and this ability is brutally simple. It's a leap that deals damage, and that's about it. And at maximum passive stacks, enemies damaged by the AoE will be stunned as well, and it will consume all of your passive stacks whether or not you hit anybody with this ability. An awesomely simple, fast leap, but clearly to help reduce his mobility, there's that bit about the cooldown reduction on the leap if you hit a god in particular. So when you use the ability to run away, like a loser, sorry that wasn't very helpful, so when you use it to escape, you won't have access to it nearly as soon as you would if you just tried to be aggressive with it. And therein lies the crux of Fenrir, and this rings true throughout the rest of his abilities. They all benefit when Fenrir uses them aggressively, but to use them aggressively, you not only need good game sense to know when to use it, but just straight up not be behind in terms of farm on whoever you're trying to jump on so you don't just lose the trade immediately. Speaking of trades, let's talk about why that leap is so good for setting up for Fenrir's second ability. Upon activation, Fenrir's second ability will grant a buff for 6 whole seconds. It grants him flat 25% attack speed and 20% lifesteal, and grants physical power based off the ability's level, and also grants him 2 stacks of his passive. I know I've said it in other guides before, but this is definitely in the running for the best stim in the game. And it's extremely simple too. When you leap on someone with your first ability, just basic to basic and just kind of walk at them with your basic attacks and let the stim do the rest. If you're able to stay in melee range, this stim really does do the heavy lifting for you and lets you win most extended trades, if not all of them. But of course, this is all dependent on you staying in melee range to get it done. Sometimes it's best to just stun with your leap and use this stim to run people down, and sometimes you just want to rush right in with your third ability. In Fenrir's third ability, he leaps and gains protections. If there are any enemies within the AoE, he will latch onto the enemy closest to the center of the ability. If he latches onto an enemy, he will leap 3 more times, resulting in 4 leaps total, each leap dealing full damage to the target and dealing reduced damage in an AoE around the target, and he will maintain that protections gain for the full duration. And if Fenrir was at maximum passive stacks when he casts the ability, he will be granted additional power scaling. Fenrir is immune to knockups as he leaps and will chase enemies if they dash, but keep in mind that if he's hit with any other hard CC like a stun or a silence, or if the enemy leaps or teleports, or even in more niche situations becomes stealthed,
He got out of it with the stealth.
Fenrir's third ability will be cancelled. That's obviously great for both clearing camps and disappearing enemy life bars, but never forget that this ability is still a leap. That means that you can use it over walls for escapes, for example, meaning abilities by leaping out of their range, or just plain use it to close gaps so you can get closer and leap on them with your first ability. In terms of fighting enemy gods, Fenrir up until this point has been extremely simple, but now at this point in the combo, i.e. after leaping, you have to make a choice. It's best to just sit there basic attacking with your 2 active, saving your 3 for chase down, or is it better to get a few basic attacks in to get your passive maximized, then activate your third ability? Because while your third ability does absurd damage, if it gets interrupted, it's done. So when you leap on someone, you need to know they're not just going to stop the ability, which as I mentioned can be done in a bunch of ways. That means if they have a teleport or a leap, hard CC other than a knockup, or can stealth themselves, you need to get whatever ability that may be out of the way before you use your third ability, because trust me, this ability will get stopped. You really can just leap on someone, activate 2, and just basic attack them to death. Then, once you use their movement ability or whatever ability can cancel the third ability, use it to catch back up to them. You may wonder, what can you do in the meantime if you can't win the trade with your stim, or the enemy team is patient enough to not use their abilities that would cancel your 3? That's where your ultimate comes into play, which is basically Fenrir's 3 in reverse. Fenrir becomes larger in size, becomes CC immune, gains huge amounts of movement speed, and if he has that maximum passive, gains protections. He can stay in this mode for up to 4 seconds, but can cancel it at any time. Fenrir cannot use any of his other abilities during this time, but he gains a unique AoE basic attack. The basic attack will deal damage to things like minions, but will not affect CC immune entities like Gold Fury or Fire Giant. Things get interesting when you hit an enemy god with it. Fenrir grabs the enemy god closest to the middle of the ability and carries them for up to 1.75 seconds, extending the original 4-second timer, and yes, Fenrir holds them in his mouth for the entire duration, meaning you're meant to use the first 4 seconds to get to the target, then 1.75 seconds to get them back to your team for them to wreak havoc on them. But if you bite an enemy god while they're CC immune, or if they become CC immune via something like a purification beads or a cleanse like Geb Shield, they will be dropped from your mouth and the ultimate will end entirely. So that's the main usage of this ability, at least in teamfights. Leap and or blink in, then ultimate as soon as you can in order to get the CC immunity and movement speed. Then grab someone like a mage, hunter, or assassin and bring them back to your team, like a good boy. In the elephant in the room time, Fenrir does move his mouth around, and therefore whoever you picked up, depending on where you're looking, will move, and for some reason, when you stop walking with the god in your mouth, Fenrir moves his head to the side. He's been doing that for like 10 years, and it throws your entire team off, gets you yelled at, and you did nothing other than stop moving so they could hit him. It's really lame. I hope they fix that one day. So, but yeah, that's annoying and something to look out for, but more important was the part about gods becoming CC immune and dropping out of your grab. It's a lot like Ares' ultimate where if you get the enemy, they are totally dead. But for the most part, you're grabbing who you grab to try to get those things like purification beads and the Geb Shield so that you can not only do this again in the next fight, but also continue your assault alongside your team now that the enemy team has been forced to expend these expensive resources to avoid this insanely strong ability. And this is all another reason why Tank Fenrir works so well. He can get back there with his ultimate safely, guaranteed he gets a grab on somebody, and then has free reign to use the rest of his kit to wreak havoc afterwards. In teamfights, it really doesn't get more complicated than this. Fenrir is the simplest of the simple, but what he requires from you is a great deal of both game sense and confidence. You need really good game sense to know when it's useful to ult someone and try and burn someone's beads, if the enemy team will just gang up on you and kill you before you can even get the grab off, and so on. It's going to take a lot of leaps of faith and a lot of deaths to start understanding when it's best to Fenrir ult. But as a general rule, if it's super easy for them to avoid your grab, say they have a CC immune ultimate or an easy cleanse to use like Geb or Chiron, it's just best to ult nice and early and burn those resources so your team could follow up off of that. There really are some situations where you're just not going to grab anyone with the ultimate, but that should never mean that you don't bother using it. Speaking of which, it's still a very loaded ability, so it's great for all sorts of shenanigans and outplays, especially during the early and mid game. All in with your main combo, but hold on to the ultimate until the very end to make the enemy play sheepishly in expectation for your ultimate. Or ultimate right off the bat and hold on to your ultimate form, to force enemies to either use their purification beads preemptively or their movement ability right off the bat. Then you chase them with either your ultimate, movement speed, or your core kit if you ran out of time with the ultimate. So you can wait and see what usage of the ultimate you like best. Just make sure that you actually get in there and do it, no dilly-dally. Leap in, ult, walk right past the entire enemy team and grab whoever is most important to kill. No second thoughts. Speaking of no thought, some combos with Fenrir. 1, basic, 2, basic, and 3, preferably at full passive when you leap. Against low mobility targets, 2, blink, 3, basic attacks, then chase with 1. At super long range, or when surprising people over walls, blink, 1, basic, 2, basic, and 3. 1, basic, 2, basic ult, and chase with your 3. Blink, ult, pick them up, then what you do next depends on who you picked up and what they can do. Against targets with dashes, you want to 2, then 3 onto them to latch yourself onto them, then chase with your 1. Against targets with leaps or teleports, you want to 2 and basic attack them a bunch to force a movement ability out of them, then chase with your 1 and 3. For ability leveling, you want your 1 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 2 at level 3. From there, what you max depends on your playstyle and who you're against. Against characters who can very easily break your third ability, you want to max the 2. If you want to level the 1 over the 2 in this situation, that makes sense, but putting levels into the 2 is just one of those just trust me bro type of things, where when you get the chance to max the 2 first, you'll see why I recommend it over leveling the 1. And against teams who have no chance of breaking your 3, max that, and then put a level into your ultimate at level 5 of course, but skip leveling it until your core 3 abilities are done leveling. Fenrir is yet another old but gold god in SMITE. I know we've been kinda off that streak for a few gods now, and Fenrir has had more changes than some other gods from the beta that are still relevant, namely around his second and third abilities, but the old dog does the same tricks and he gets by just fine. He got frankly way overbuffed earlier this year, since his second ability was still providing 80 power from a previous buff, and they didn't think to reduce this power stem when they did the whole power and protections reduction earlier this season, so his win rate is a little bloated this season in particular. But still, looking back at Fenrir, there's always a streak or multiple streaks where he just becomes meta literally every season, whether that be the support role, jungle role, or both. He maintains a solid win rate in ranked and his competitive history speaks for itself, adapting, soloing everyone in Season 2 World Finals, Aurora literally running the duo lane for an entire season straight in Season 5, Panatom laying the smackdown with him now in Season 10, the list just goes on. But note how I said he has streaks of time in the meta. What's it like when he's out of the meta or against counter matchups? It's not looking good there, to be honest. He's extremely simple, so that means when he's great, and when he's just in a straight up bad matchup or a meta where his tools aren't as effective, he really can't do anything to eke out a win. Like when Nox, Ares, or Ganesh support our meta, or if you pick Fenrir too early and just get hard countered by an always good but not great pick like Gep, whose shield just completely cleanses the ultimate's grab and makes Fenrir a non-factor. Or backline picks like Hel, Martikros, Ram, and Danza, who simply do not care that Fenrir has an ultimate. So in summation, Fenrir is an incredible god to have in your arsenal, and you really should learn this god. And when he wins games, he wins them, like super hard. But the losses feel every bit as bad as the wins feel good. So learn your combos and matchups, and you'll have a fun old time. Just don't get too carried away picking him first every game, then get surprised when there's 4 counter matchups on the enemy team. That's all I have on Fenrir for now. Thanks for watching.